Listen closely, my friends. What if the person you keep abandoning every day is yourself? You give people your patience, your attention, your forgiveness, and your best energy, then come home to a mind that constantly tells you that you are not enough. You keep chasing approval, affection, success, and a better version of yourself, hoping that one day you will finally feel worthy. But what if the life you are trying so desperately to improve cannot become peaceful until you learn how to stand beside the person you already are? Loving yourself first does not mean becoming selfish, arrogant, or obsessed with your own importance. It means refusing to treat yourself like an enemy while you are trying to build a better life. The Stoics understood something most people discover far too late. You cannot build inner peace by constantly declaring war on yourself. You can correct your flaws without despising yourself. You can demand more from yourself without believing you are worthless. Think about Marcus Aurelius. He was surrounded by power, responsibility, war, betrayal, and uncertainty, yet his deepest battle was never simply against the world outside him. It was against the disorder within. He repeatedly reminded himself to return to his own character, his own judgment, his own conduct. That is where real self-respect begins, not in looking perfect, but in becoming someone you can trust when nobody is watching. And maybe that is why you feel exhausted. You are not only fighting life's problems, you are fighting yourself while facing them. Every mistake becomes evidence against you. Every rejection becomes a verdict on your worth. Every comparison becomes another reason to hate the life you have. But today, we are going to break that pattern. In this video, you will discover 6 powerful Stoic lessons for learning to love yourself first, not through empty affirmations or pretending everything is perfect, but through discipline, acceptance, self-respect, and a deeper understanding of who you are. Because the goal is not to convince yourself that you are flawless. The goal is to become so at peace with yourself that you no longer need the world to constantly prove that you matter. Lesson 1. Stop making your worth depend on other people. One of the deepest ways you betray yourself is by allowing other people's reactions to become measurements of your worth. One person ignores your message, and suddenly you question yourself. Someone chooses another person, and you wonder what you lacked. Someone criticizes you, and instead of asking whether their words are true, you immediately ask, "What is wrong with me?" Slowly, without realizing it, you hand strangers the authority to decide how you feel about yourself. Imagine a man standing in front of a mirror every morning, but instead of looking at his own reflection, he looks at the faces of everyone around him. If they smile, he feels valuable. If they approve, he feels attractive. If they reject him, his entire identity collapses. That sounds absurd, but emotionally, millions of people live exactly this way. They don't have a stable sense of self. They have a collection of other people's opinions stitched together and mistaken for identity. The Stoics challenged this entire way of living. Epictetus repeatedly returned to the distinction between what belongs to us and what does not. Your choices belong to you. Your character belongs to you. Your effort belongs to you. But another person's opinion, affection, attention, or approval does not. So why build your self-worth on something you were never given control over in the first place? Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by people who could praise him in the morning and betray him by evening. Imagine allowing every political opinion, every insult, every rumor, and every person's approval to determine your emotional state. He would have been mentally imprisoned by the crowd. Instead, Stoicism demanded something harder. Return to your own character. Ask not, "Do they approve of me?" Ask, "Am I acting according to the person I want to be?" That question changes everything. If someone dislikes you because you refuse to betray your values, their rejection is not proof that you are unworthy. If someone walks away because you established a healthy boundary, their absence is not evidence that you should have abandoned yourself. And if someone fails to recognize your value, you do not need to spend your life standing outside their door, begging them to see what you should have learned to see within yourself. There is a difference between self-worth and self-improvement that most people completely misunderstand. You can say, "I need to become more disciplined," without saying, "I am worthless." You can admit, "I made a terrible mistake," without turning it into, "I am a terrible person." One statement identifies a behavior, the other attacks an identity. Growth becomes almost impossible when every correction is accompanied by self-hatred. Think about a sculptor working on a piece of marble. When he sees something that needs to be removed, he does not hate the stone. He simply understands that the finished form requires patience, pressure, and refinement. Your flaws can be treated the same way. You don't need to destroy yourself to improve yourself. You need enough self-respect to tell yourself the truth without turning that truth into a weapon. This is where real self-love becomes much deeper than the modern idea of simply feeling good about yourself. Sometimes loving yourself means refusing the easy escape. It means getting out of bed when your mind wants another excuse. It means walking away from someone who repeatedly disrespects you. It means admitting that your habits are hurting your future. It means saying no when you desperately want to be liked. Self-love is not always comfort. Sometimes self-love is the courage to stop betraying yourself. There is a powerful psychological reason this matters. When your sense of worth constantly depends on external validation, your brain begins scanning the social world for threats and approval. A delayed message becomes significant. A changed tone becomes significant. A lower number of likes becomes significant. You start monitoring everyone because you are unconsciously asking the same question again and again. Am I still enough? And the more you search outside yourself for the answer, the less stable you become inside. That is why some people can receive 100 compliments and still feel insecure. The problem was never a shortage of compliments. The problem was that compliments were being used as temporary medication for an internal wound. The moment the praise disappears, the insecurity returns. But when your worth becomes anchored in your character rather than the crowd, praise becomes enjoyable without becoming necessary, and criticism becomes information without becoming a verdict. So begin with something brutally simple. The next time someone rejects you, criticizes you, ignores you, or fails to choose you, pause before judging yourself. Ask 3 questions. Did I act with integrity? Did I do what was within my control? Is there something useful I can learn from this? If the answer is yes, take the lesson and leave the shame behind, because you were never meant to spend your entire life auditioning for permission to respect yourself. The world will change its opinion of you constantly. Some people will admire you, some will misunderstand you, some will love you, some will leave. Your task is not to become acceptable to everyone. Your task is to become someone you do not have to abandon just to be accepted. And once you stop asking the world to tell you that you are worthy, something incredibly powerful happens. You become free to improve without desperation, love without begging, walk away without collapsing, and stand alone without feeling empty. That is where loving yourself first truly begins. Lesson 2. Stop punishing yourself for being human. There is a quiet form of self-destruction that looks like ambition from the outside, constantly reminding yourself of everything you should have done better. You replay the mistake. You remember the opportunity you wasted. You think about the person you disappointed. You compare who you are today with the person you believe you should already have become. And every time you remember the past, you reopen the wound as if suffering again could somehow change what already happened. But pain is not payment for a mistake. Imagine carrying a heavy stone everywhere you go because of something you did 5 years ago. Every morning you put it on your back. Every afternoon you feel its weight. Every night you sleep beside it. When someone asks why you are carrying it, you say, "Because I deserve to remember what I did." But the stone does not repair the past. It does not restore the opportunity. It does not change the person you hurt. It simply makes today's journey heavier. That is what unresolved shame does to the human mind. Stoicism offers a much harder and more useful response. The Stoics did not teach you to pretend your mistakes never happened. They taught you to meet reality without adding unnecessary suffering to it. If you made the wrong decision, acknowledge it. If you behaved badly, take responsibility. If there is something you can repair, repair it. But once the lesson has been extracted, continuing to punish yourself is not wisdom. It is attachment to a version of yourself that no longer exists. Marcus Aurelius understood that every morning was another opportunity to return to reason. He did not wake up demanding perfection from himself. He reminded himself that human beings make mistakes, become irritated, misunderstand things, lose patience, and sometimes fail to live according to their own principles. The question was never whether you would fail. The question was what you would do after the failure. This distinction can change the way you see your entire past. There is a difference between guilt and growth. Guilt says, "I did something wrong, therefore I am bad." Growth says, "I did something wrong, therefore I have something to understand." One traps you inside an identity, the other gives you a direction. One keeps staring at the wound, the other asks what the wound taught you. Think about a person who once wasted years because of poor decisions. Maybe they neglected their health, destroyed a relationship through their own immaturity, abandoned an important dream, or spent years chasing things that never mattered. Years later, they finally wake up and see it clearly. The instinct is often to say, "How could I have been so stupid?" But that question rarely produces wisdom. A better question is, "Now that I can see what I could not see then, what will I do with that knowledge?" That is the difference between self-respect and self-punishment. Self-respect tells the truth. It does not need to lie to you and say, "You did nothing wrong." Sometimes you did. Sometimes you were selfish. Sometimes you were weak. Sometimes you ignored the warning signs. Sometimes you hurt people. Loving yourself does not mean protecting yourself from uncomfortable truth. It means becoming strong enough to hear the truth without deciding that you are beyond redemption. A tree does not hate the branch that broke during a storm. It does not spend the next decade staring at the broken place and wishing it had never happened. It continues growing around the wound. The scar becomes part of its structure. Your past can work the same way. Some experiences will leave marks that never completely disappear, but a scar is not evidence that the body failed. Sometimes it is evidence that the body survived. Modern psychology also gives us a reason to be careful with constant self-criticism. When negative self-talk becomes repetitive, the mind can begin treating that internal voice as familiar truth rather than temporary judgment. You stop saying, "I failed at something," and start saying, "I am a failure." The behavior disappears and the label remains. Then every new mistake becomes evidence supporting the label. A single event becomes an identity, and the identity begins controlling future behavior. This is why self-compassion is not weakness. It can actually create the psychological space required for honest change. If every mistake triggers humiliation and self-hatred, you become motivated to hide the mistake rather than understand it. But when you can look at yourself and say, "Yes, I failed, and I am still responsible for becoming better," you can examine your behavior without running from yourself. Epictetus taught a powerful principle. It is not simply what happens that matters, but how we respond to what happens. Apply that inwardly. Your past is something that happened. Your relationship with your past is something you can still influence. You cannot go back and rewrite the scene, but you can decide whether that scene becomes a prison or a lesson. So the next time your mind brings an old mistake back to you, do not immediately attack yourself. Sit with it. Ask, what was I unable to see then? What did this experience teach me? What can I repair? What behavior must never be repeated? Then answer those questions honestly. If an apology is needed, apologize. If a habit must change, change it. If someone deserves restitution, make it where possible. But after responsibility has been taken, stop confusing punishment with transformation. You do not honor your past by remaining broken because of it. You honor it by refusing to waste what it taught you. And perhaps this is one of the deepest forms of loving yourself first. Being willing to meet the person you used to be without hatred, while still having the courage to become someone better. Because you cannot build a peaceful future while constantly putting your present self on trial for the crimes of your past. Learn from who you were, take responsibility for who you are, and then give yourself permission to become who you can still be. Lesson 3. Learn to enjoy your own company. One of the quietest signs that a person has not yet made peace with themselves is this: they cannot sit alone without needing an escape. The moment silence appears, they reach for a screen. The moment they are alone, they search for noise. The moment their thoughts become audible, they distract themselves again. Many people are not afraid of loneliness. They are afraid of meeting themselves without distractions. Think about this for a moment. If you spent an entire day with another person who constantly criticized you, compared themselves to others, replayed old mistakes, worried about the future, and never appreciated anything in the present, you would eventually feel exhausted. Yet many people live with that voice inside their own minds every day. Then they wonder why being alone feels uncomfortable. The problem is not solitude. The problem is the relationship they have with themselves. The Stoics saw solitude differently. To them, being alone was not emptiness. It was an opportunity to return to clarity. Marcus Aurelius often withdrew into his own thoughts, not to escape life, but to understand it. He believed that a person who can sit quietly with themselves possesses a kind of strength that the world cannot easily take away. Because if your peace depends entirely on constant attention, constant entertainment, or constant company, then your peace is fragile. But if you can create peace within yourself, you carry it everywhere. Imagine two people walking through life. The first person constantly needs noise around them. They need people to reassure them, distract them, validate them, and fill every empty space. The second person enjoys people, but does not depend on them for their identity. They can sit quietly with a book, take a walk alone, think deeply, or spend an evening without stimulation and still feel complete. Which person do you think is more free? Modern life makes this lesson difficult because we are surrounded by endless distractions. Every moment of silence can be replaced with a video, a message, a notification, or another form of escape. But there is a hidden cost to constant distraction. You never learn who you are beneath the noise. You know your routines, you know your responsibilities, you know your roles. But do you know yourself when all of those things are removed? A forest gives us a powerful metaphor. When the wind is strong, the surface of a lake becomes restless, and you cannot see what lies beneath it. But when the wind stops, the water becomes still, and suddenly the depths become visible. Your mind works the same way. Constant stimulation keeps the surface moving. Silence allows you to see what has been hidden, your fears, your desires, your values, your wounds, and your truth. This is why some people avoid solitude for years, not because they dislike being alone, but because being alone forces honesty. It asks difficult questions. What do I actually want? Why am I unhappy? What am I running from? Who have I become? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are also the beginning of self-understanding, and self-understanding is the foundation of self-love. There is a famous idea in philosophy: if you cannot enjoy your own company, you have become dependent on escape. That does not mean you must isolate yourself from people. Human connection is important. Love, friendship, and community matter deeply. But there is a difference between enjoying connection and needing connection to feel valuable. One is healthy, the other is emotional dependence. Think about the people who seem calm, grounded, and quietly confident. Often they have learned something that many others have not. They know how to be alone without feeling abandoned. They know how to think without panicking. They know how to rest without guilt. They know how to enjoy simple moments without constantly needing more stimulation. They have become friends with their own minds. Psychology also supports this idea. Studies show that people who develop self-awareness and healthy solitude often experience greater emotional stability and stronger relationships. Why? Because when you stop expecting others to rescue you from yourself, you begin bringing peace into relationships instead of bringing neediness. You stop asking people to fill every empty space within you, and love becomes a choice rather than a dependency. So begin with something simple. Spend a little time without distraction. Walk without music. Sit quietly for a few minutes. Write your thoughts. Read something meaningful. Watch the sunset without reaching for your phone. At first your mind may resist. It has become accustomed to noise. But slowly something changes. Silence stops feeling empty. It starts feeling restorative. And one day you discover something powerful. You no longer fear being alone, because you have become someone whose company you genuinely enjoy. That is one of the deepest forms of loving yourself first, because the person you spend the most time with in this life will always be you. And peace begins the moment you stop treating your own presence as something you need to escape. Lesson 4. Stop abandoning yourself to keep others. Sometimes the greatest betrayal in your life is not something another person did to you. It is what you repeatedly do to yourself just to keep someone else happy. You say yes when you desperately want to say no. You stay silent when something hurts you. You accept disrespect because you're afraid they might leave. You shrink your personality, hide your needs, and change your boundaries until the person in front of you is comfortable and the person inside you is slowly disappearing. Think about a house whose owner keeps opening every door to strangers but never checks whether the people entering are damaging the rooms. Eventually, there is nothing left that feels like home. That is what happens when you give everyone access to you without asking whether they respect the person they have been invited to meet. Self-love begins when you realize that your kindness does not require unlimited access. The Stoics understood that living according to your principles sometimes means disappointing people. Epictetus emphasized the importance of knowing what belongs to your own judgment and character, rather than becoming enslaved to external approval. If you constantly reshape yourself to satisfy everyone else, you are no longer living according to your values. You are living according to an audience, and an audience can never agree on what version of you it wants. Imagine Marcus Aurelius making every decision based on whether someone would approve of him. He could not have carried the responsibility of an empire that way. One person would demand softness, another would demand strength. One would praise mercy, another would call it weakness. One would celebrate a decision, another would condemn it. If he tried to satisfy every voice, he would eventually lose the ability to hear his own conscience. You face the same problem on a smaller scale. Maybe your friend expects you to always be available. Maybe your family expects you to follow a path you don't want. Maybe a relationship has trained you to apologize whenever you express a need. Maybe you are afraid that saying no will make someone think you are selfish, so you keep sacrificing pieces of yourself to preserve the relationship. But ask yourself something uncomfortable. What kind of relationship requires you to disappear in order to keep it alive? There is a difference between compromise and self-abandonment. Healthy compromise means two people adjust while both remain respected. Self-abandonment means one person continuously sacrifices their identity, boundaries, peace, or values so the other person never has to feel uncomfortable. One creates connection, the other creates resentment disguised as love. And resentment eventually collects interest. Every time you say yes when you mean no, something inside you notices. Every time you tolerate behavior that violates your values, something inside you remembers. Every time you silence yourself to avoid conflict, you teach yourself that your feelings matter less than someone else's comfort. Eventually, you may become angry, not only at them, but at yourself. Because deep down, you know you were the one who kept abandoning yourself. This is why boundaries are not walls built against love. They are structures that protect healthy love. A boundary says, this is what I accept. This is what I don't accept. If this continues, this is what I will do. It is not a threat. It is clarity. The Stoic idea of living according to virtue gives you a powerful standard here. Before asking whether someone will be pleased with your decision, ask whether the decision is consistent with your values. Is it honest? Is it fair? Is it necessary? Does it preserve your dignity? Does it move you toward the person you want to become? If the answer is yes, someone else's disappointment does not automatically make your decision wrong. Picture a lighthouse standing alone against a violent ocean. Waves crash against it. Wind screams around it. Ships pass by. The lighthouse does not chase every ship and beg it to appreciate the light. It simply continues doing what it was built to do. Your values should become your lighthouse. People may misunderstand you. Some may leave. Some may criticize your boundaries. But if you constantly abandon your principles to keep every person close, you will eventually become lost in everyone else's expectations. This does not mean becoming cold. Loving yourself first does not mean refusing to care about anyone. It means learning to care without disappearing. You can be generous without becoming available to everyone. You can forgive without reopening the same door. You can love someone deeply while recognizing that they are not healthy for your life. You can disappoint someone without becoming cruel. And sometimes the most loving sentence you can say is simply, I cannot do that. No 10-minute explanation, no desperate apology, no long defense, just clarity. Because when you finally respect yourself, you stop treating every boundary like a crime that requires permission. You begin understanding that the right people will not require you to betray yourself to prove that you love them. And the wrong people may leave when you stop allowing them unlimited access. Let them. Because losing someone who only stayed while you were abandoning yourself is not always a loss. Sometimes it is the first evidence that you finally chose yourself. And that is what it means to love yourself first. Not to place yourself above everyone else, but to stop placing yourself beneath everyone else. You can love people without losing yourself. You can serve others without becoming invisible. You can be kind without becoming weak. And you can walk away from what destroys your peace without feeling guilty for choosing to remain whole. Lesson 5. Keep the promises you make to yourself. There is a version of self-love that nobody talks about enough. Learning to trust yourself again. Not through compliments, not through motivational quotes, but through evidence. Every time you promise yourself that you will wake up early and then ignore the alarm, every time you say you will stop chasing someone and then return the moment you feel lonely, every time you decide to change a habit and abandon the decision when it becomes uncomfortable, something inside you takes note. You may forget the moment, but your mind remembers the pattern. Slowly, you stop trusting your own word. Imagine having a friend who constantly makes promises and constantly breaks them. They say they will be there but disappear. They say they will change but repeat the same behavior. They tell you they have your back but abandon you whenever things become difficult. Eventually, you stop believing them, not because you hate them, but because their words have lost credibility. Now ask yourself, have you become that friend to yourself? This is where Stoicism becomes practical. The Stoics placed enormous value on living according to principles rather than temporary feelings. Epictetus did not build his philosophy around saying beautiful things about yourself. He focused on practicing what you claimed to believe. Marcus Aurelius did not need to convince himself every morning that he was disciplined. His discipline was demonstrated through action. Character is not what you tell yourself you are. Character is what your repeated actions prove you are. That means self-love sometimes looks completely different from what people expect. It looks like keeping the promise to train when nobody's watching. It looks like putting the phone away when you promised yourself you would focus. It looks like leaving the relationship you know is damaging you instead of returning because you are lonely. It looks like choosing sleep instead of another hour of meaningless scrolling. It looks like doing the difficult thing you told yourself you would do, even when the emotional excitement has disappeared. Because motivation is unreliable. Some mornings you will feel powerful. Other mornings you will feel exhausted, uncertain, and completely uninterested in doing what needs to be done. If your commitments only survive when you feel motivated, they are not commitments yet. They are preferences. Discipline begins when your decision remains valid, even after the emotion that created it disappears. Think about a bridge. Nobody trusts a bridge because the bridge claims it is strong. They trust it because it has been tested. Weight passes over it, storms hit it, time attacks it, yet it remains standing. Your self-confidence works the same way. You do not build deep confidence by repeatedly telling yourself, I am strong. You build it by giving yourself small pieces of evidence that say, when I say I will do something, I can count on myself. Start small. Do not make 20 promises tonight. Choose one. Maybe you promise yourself that you will walk for 30 minutes every morning. Maybe you will stop checking a certain person's profile. Maybe you will spend the first 30 minutes of your day without your phone. Maybe you will read 10 pages every night. The action itself is not the most important part. The important part is that you said you would do it, and then you did. Every completed promise becomes a brick. 1 brick looks insignificant. 10 bricks create a foundation. Hundreds create a structure strong enough to withstand pressure. In the same way, every time you keep your word to yourself, you strengthen your internal foundation. Eventually, something changes. You stop needing constant motivation because you have developed trust. You stop wondering whether you can handle difficult things because your past actions have already answered the question. And there is another side to this lesson. Stop making promises you have no intention of keeping. people often create impossible standards and then punish themselves when reality defeats them. They say, "From tomorrow I will never procrastinate again. I will work out every day. I will eat perfectly. I will never waste time." Then life happens. They miss one day, feel like they failed completely, and abandon everything. Extreme promises create fragile identities. Sustainable commitments create strong ones. The Stoics understood the value of focusing on what is actually within your control. You cannot guarantee that every day will go according to plan. You can control whether you return. You can miss a workout without becoming someone who quits. You can have a terrible morning and still save the afternoon. You can fail today and keep your commitment tomorrow. Consistency is not never falling off the path. It is refusing to turn one bad day into a permanent identity. So when you make a promise to yourself, make it realistic enough to keep and meaningful enough to matter. Then protect it. Don't announce it to everyone. Don't wait for applause. Don't need anyone to notice. Let the evidence accumulate quietly. Because eventually you will wake up one morning and realize something has changed. You trust yourself. You don't need to wonder whether you will abandon yourself when things become difficult. You have proof. And perhaps that is one of the most powerful forms of self-love there is. Becoming the person you can rely on when nobody else is there. Love yourself enough to keep your word. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but consistently, because when you finally trust yourself, you stop searching everywhere for someone to save you, and you begin discovering that you have been building the person capable of carrying you all along. Lesson 6. Stop waiting to become someone else before you accept yourself. One of the cruelest ways people reject themselves is by constantly postponing their own acceptance. They tell themselves, "I will love myself when I lose the weight, when I become successful, when I make more money, when I fix my face, when I get the relationship I want, when I become disciplined, when I finally become the person I imagine in my head." And without realizing it, they turn their entire present life into a waiting room. They are alive today, but they have given themselves permission to feel worthy only in the future. Imagine a prisoner standing outside a beautiful house, holding the key in his hand, but refusing to enter because he believes he must first become worthy of living there. Every morning he looks through the window and imagines the life inside. He works, struggles, improves, sacrifices, and tells himself that one day, when he has finally become enough, he will allow himself to enter. But the door was never locked. He was the one who kept himself outside. This is where Stoicism offers a powerful correction. The Stoics believed in improvement, discipline, and the pursuit of virtue, but they did not teach that peace should be postponed until life becomes perfect. Marcus Aurelius understood that life is always unfinished. There is always another responsibility, another difficulty, another weakness to work on. If you require perfection before allowing yourself peace, you have created a condition that life can never satisfy. There's a difference between saying, "I want to become better," and saying, "I am not allowed to respect myself until I become better." The first creates growth. The second creates war. You can pursue a stronger body without hating the body you have today. You can pursue financial success without believing that your current situation makes you worthless. You can improve your appearance without making your reflection responsible for your happiness. Improvement should be an expression of self-respect, not a punishment for being human. Think about an athlete preparing for the Olympics. They do not wake up every morning screaming at their body because it is not yet at the finish line. They understand that the body must be trained gradually. One session builds capacity, another exposes weakness, another reveals what needs improvement. The athlete respects the starting point while working toward the destination. Your life deserves the same relationship. You can honor where you are while still moving toward where you want to go. This is especially important in a world built around comparison. You open your phone and see someone younger, richer, fitter, more attractive, more successful, or further ahead. Suddenly, your ordinary Tuesday feels like failure, but you are comparing your private reality with someone else's selected moments. You see their achievement, not their anxiety, their photograph, not their insecurity, their success, not the years of uncertainty behind it. You are using someone else's highlight reel to judge your unfinished chapter. And that is an unfair trial. Seneca warned against allowing wealth, status, and external possessions to become the foundation of our inner condition. The Stoic question was always deeper. What kind of person are you becoming? Not simply, what do you have? Not, how impressive do you look? But, are you becoming wiser, more disciplined, more courageous, more just? These are internal measurements. They cannot be taken away simply because someone else has a bigger house, a better body, or a more successful career. Modern psychology also points toward the danger of conditional self-worth. When people base their value on specific achievements or external outcomes, their confidence can rise and collapse with every success and failure. They feel powerful when things go well and worthless when they don't. That creates an emotional roller coaster where the outside world controls the inside. You become addicted to evidence that you are enough because you never allowed yourself to believe it without evidence. So change the relationship. Instead of saying, I will love myself when I succeed, say, because I respect myself, I will work towards success. Instead of, I hate my body, so I need to change it, say, I respect my body enough to take better care of it. Instead of, I am behind everyone, say, I am responsible for the next step in my own life. The language changes because the foundation changes. You are no longer improving yourself because you hate who you are. You are improving yourself because you refuse to waste who you could become. That distinction is enormous. Think of a gardener. A gardener does not stand over a young tree screaming because it is not yet enormous. They understand seasons. They water it, protect it, prune it, give it sunlight. They don't pull on the branches demanding that growth happen faster. They create the conditions for growth and allow time to do its work. You need that patience with yourself. Maybe you are not where you want to be. Good, admit it. Maybe there are parts of your life that need serious change. Change them. Maybe you have wasted time. Stop wasting more. But don't add another mistake to the list by spending the present hating yourself for the past. You are allowed to be a work in progress and still deserve respect. You are allowed to have goals and still enjoy today. You are allowed to be imperfect and still experience peace. And perhaps this is the real meaning of loving yourself first. You stop making acceptance the reward you receive after becoming perfect. You give yourself acceptance now, and from that foundation you build, because the future version of you does not need a destroyed version of you to be born. He needs your patience, your discipline, your honesty, and your belief that the person you are today is already worthy of being cared for while becoming the person you were meant to become. Maybe loving yourself first was never about becoming obsessed with yourself. Maybe it was about finally stopping the war against yourself. Across these 6 lessons, you learn to stop measuring your worth through other people's opinions, stop punishing yourself for being human, enjoy your own company, protect yourself through boundaries, keep the promises you make to yourself, and accept who you are while continuing to grow. You don't need to become perfect before you deserve peace. You don't need everyone's approval before you deserve respect. And you don't need to become someone else before you are allowed to appreciate the person standing in the mirror today. Improve yourself, but don't hate yourself. Choose yourself. not because other people don't matter, but because you finally understand that abandoning yourself was never the price of being loved. If this video meant something to you, like it, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. And tell me in the comments, which lesson do you need most in your life right now? Remember, the relationship you have with yourself becomes the foundation for every other relationship you will ever have. So love yourself first, not tomorrow, today.